Ujua nai ga kinya mishkwa beneshi kwe indishnakas, askanaba na donjaba, megase endodam, bawa ting Anishinaabe kwe indao. Hello everyone, my Anishinaabe name is Mishkwa Beneshi Kwe, but my legal name is Shelby Boggs. I'm from Escanaba, Michigan. I am of the Eagle Clan, and I'm a tribal citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians.
Bonjour, hi, it's Guy Waden. I'm an Indigenous rights activist as well as environmentalist, and so standing up for the environment and for the people is something that I'm very passionate about and that I love doing.
My name is Derek Nicholas. I'm also known as Nagani Benes. I'm an enrolled member of the Red Cliff Band of Ojibwe, and I'm the Traditional Foods and Nutrition Program Coordinator.
My name is Kaylee Mancha. I hold a lot of different roles in the community here. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm a birth worker and co-founder of Heart and Soul Collective. And my identity, as I would describe myself, is Latinx with Sicilian and Indigenous roots.
So I would not say that there was no trauma or issues for Indigenous people pre-contact. However, I think you saw some big changes at the beginning of the colonial era, where you had England, France, Spain, Russia in Alaska, that were trying to colonize. And colonial violence is a very different kind of violence. Instead of saying, you know, I'm going to clunk you over the head and steal your bologna sandwich, so to speak, they were saying you have to worship God the way I do. You have to speak the language that I speak, not the language you speak. It was about erasure. And that did a much more profound kind of damage and sustained trauma for Native people. And it escalates. If you imagine by the end of the 1800s, not only is there been tremendous violence visited upon the population, but the children taken away and sent to schools where they receive lots of harsh physical discipline and no nurture. And so you see an escalation in the trauma responses, you know, in the late 1800s. And they don't really start ending the residential boarding schools system until, you know, World War II. When you stop hitting somebody in the head with a hammer, it doesn't mean that they're not still feeling the effects of all the traumas. So healing takes generations, not just time, but generations.
I went to school at the Deer River High School, which is a border town, essentially, the town of Deer River. So it's half Native and half not Native. And because of that, a lot of our teachers did teach us like the things that everyone should be taught in regards to American history, because Native history is American history. So we learned about the boarding schools, smallpox and stuff in the Native population just not being immune to those diseases, and how that was 90 million that ended up losing their lives in those first early stages of colonialism. And so learning that in high school was very formative to that. And also my mom is just someone who was deep into activism and would take us along to different protests and stuff. And my mom is just a strong Indigenous woman, and I try to follow in her footsteps. Even though my voice is not very big in person, online, I'm able to sort of step away from that and have a big voice, which I'm very thankful for.
Well, I'm double majoring in social work and Native American studies. I'm involved in a federal grant program called Walking the Path Together, and I thought that it would just be a great way to get involved, get acquainted with the Native community here. So I grew up downstate, so I grew up like geographically separated from my tribal community and people. But because of the boarding schools, my family grew up so culturally disconnected. Like my dad's mom, my Nokomis, died when he was 7. And so my dad kind of hopped around in the foster care system. And so my dad didn't necessarily know what it meant to be Indian growing up, and so in return, I didn't understand what it meant to be Anishinaabe.
My family didn't really speak about being Indigenous at all, you know. Due to the boarding schools, a lot of that information wasn't passed down to my father and my aunts and uncles, and therefore me as well. My family did everything they could to take us away from that life. You know, we had properties over in Bad River and Red Cliff, and they sold them all and just did everything they could to separate us from the culture, because back then it wasn't good to be Native. We weren't allowed to practice our spirituality or our culture, so it was kind of just best to be assimilated with today's society.
First video that I filmed that went viral was paying homage to like my ancestors and just a lot of Indigenous folks who have Indigenous features. Growing up, I've always like wanted a nose job, and that's just because of like the hook in my nose. But now I am completely not of that mindset, because the hook in my nose is a homage to my ancestors, and there's lots of historical photos of Native people with their side profiles, and it's like highlighting their noses. And it is something that is representative of my people, even though phenotypically there's not one way to look Native. And that's also another big discussion that that video opened up for the Native TikTok community, which is very important to have.
You know, I have really struggled with identity and how to identify as a queer person. It's like, am I Latinx, Latina? I once was Hispanic, you know? So language evolves, which means as language evolves, our communities evolve. And understanding that I might not know my family's history because of white supremacy and colonialism. My dad's family is Mexican American, and I was one of the first grandchildren to reclaim the language of Spanish because of racism that was experienced in my dad's family. And we're American, not Mexican, was a sentiment of his upbringing. And so for me, it's about learning who I am and not centering whiteness as how I define myself, or not relying on quantum blood count to feel valid in my identity. And you know, I say Indigenous roots because I know where my family comes from. They're desert peoples, but because of the ways in which they were taken from land, I don't know exactly the Indigenous group that my people come from, but that doesn't mean that I can't honor indigeneity, that I can't sit in that. And I think sometimes we're so focused on gatekeeping that we don't allow people to reclaim.
Blood quantum requirements, that's a very controversial topic. The reason why it's so controversial is because it's pretty easy to argue both sides. You know, the idea of reservations and blood quantum, this doesn't come from Indigenous people, it comes from the westernized world. So it didn't really belong here, but I can understand where people come from. I think I've heard people say that if your tribe has blood quantum requirements, then you put an expiration date on your reservation, because that blood quantum is going to keep causing people to be pushed out of the tribe, and eventually maybe the government can take the land back.
For me, it's about restarting what was taken from us. You know, regardless of what community we're talking about, whether that's Indigenous, Black Americans, etc. We have had practices that allowed our cultures and societies to thrive for a really, really long time. But when we're thinking about reclaiming these practices, it's about knowing you're not alone.
I really reconnected with my culture in college. I went to the University of Minnesota Morris, and I got to take language classes there, so I got to learn my native language, Anishinaabe, and I got to care for the Native American gardens, so working closely with those native seeds and learning the songs and stories behind that, and then just my passion to learn more and reconnect continue to blossom. And after graduating, I found myself here in Minneapolis, and I've just been so grateful to have a lot of elders just take me under their wings and take me out in the woods and teach me things and stuff like that. So it's been a really exciting journey, and I'm really grateful for all those ones that teach me things and continue to learn and to give back.
Sometimes reconnecting can be scary because there's so much invalidation that comes with it and not knowing where to start. But I would also say, like, it's never too late to reconnect, and to also just trust in the spirits that are guiding and protecting you, and knowing that, like, the culture is yours to seek out and to reclaim, and that you should seek out your elders, offer them tobacco, and have them tell you their stories and listen. I've learned the value of listening and just hearing what other people have to say, because I think sometimes people think that when you're reconnecting, there's going to be a book or an online resource that you can read and it's going to tell you everything you need to know about your culture. But we're such an oral tradition people that to truly reconnect, you have to go out there and you have to talk with people, socialize with people, create kinship bonds. And through those relationships is how you truly learn the culture and what it means to be Indigenous.
People come to me because things like decolonizing mental health are new to Vegas. And so people come to me looking for how to integrate culture into their work, how to understand the ways that their own identities show up in these spaces. And really, it's giving people permission to do things differently than maybe we've been taught to do. I take that position of humility because I learned so much from the people that I support and hold space for, maybe more than they learned from me. So I think something I would like the audience watching this today to know is that decolonizing, it takes time. It's a series of unlearning. And so how do we unlearn what we know to be normal? How do we destigmatize seeking support, building support? Ultimately, I believe that community aid and mutual aid are the answers to a lot of our societal challenges, and finding people that are willing to do that work with you. So it's a journey. Be patient and gentle with yourself on that journey. So sometimes we hear words like decolonizing and it feels like a buzzword. And I think so many times people assume it's an action, like if I do this one intervention or if I embody this look, then I'm decolonizing, if I say the right things. But ultimately, decolonizing our lives looks like an intentional practice of being. It's saying, I'm going to intentionally center and seek out, particularly for me, BIPOC experiences, wisdom, understandings of the world. I'm going to shift my lens so that I understand the gravity of the work I'm doing, that it's not about resolving a problem or addressing a symptom, but it's about creating new systems. And so decolonizing work is long-term work, it's generational work.
Our motto at the center is "the gift is in the journey." And I feel like that's what I've truly learned through reconnecting and reclaiming my identity, is that to just slow down and know that life is not a race, and that it's okay to take your time, and life is about balance, so you're not always going to be triumphant. Sometimes life is going to have defeats, and that is inevitable. But learning how to react to that, how to be resilient, and how to keep going, and to just trust in the Spirit's guiding and protecting you, that you will get to where you're meant to be somehow.
I highly advocate for all youth to really try to reconnect with their culture. It brings a lot of value within one's life. A big thing about being Indigenous is to be of value to the community, to be as helpful as you can. And when I strongly believe that everyone has their place within the culture, and that we need to revitalize certain knowledge in certain areas to become successful. So whenever I'm teaching young ones, I'm like, hey, we all have a gift here on earth. Every plant, every animal has a gift, and so do you. And maybe your gift is that you really connected with the water. We need native voices that do marine biology and that can understand the relationships that we have with wild rice, know those stories, how the environment's affecting the wild rice. We need young ones that are passionate about learning about the animals and understanding their migration patterns, and ones that work with the trees or the stars or food. So we all have a place in this world. I think nowadays a lot of our problems that our community is facing is identity confusion, because we don't know where we fit in, and we can get depressed or anxious or face anxiety when we just don't feel like we belong in this world, that we don't have a purpose. So when we get to reconnect with our culture, you kind of figure out, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do. I've been really fortunate to have elders take me in and to teach me different things, and they told me it was my responsibility to be a hollow reed, to be a clear bone, to be as pure as possible, so that that spirit of knowledge can flow through me real easily, because the stuff that I'm teaching isn't coming from me, it's coming from my elders, which they received from their elders, and on and on and on. So that's one of my responsibilities, is to, teach the young ones the stuff that the elders are teaching me.
Thank you for joining us on Native Report as we explore the diverse and dynamic experiences of being Indigenous in today's world. Throughout the episode, we've seen how Indigenous communities navigate the complexities of modernity while preserving their unique traditions and identities. The stories we've shared reflect a tapestry of experiences, each contributing to a broader understanding of what it means to be Indigenous in a rapidly changing world.